So good morning and welcome to the last session in our Buddhism in a Nutshell series. And so thank you very much for taking the time to come and learn a little bit more about the Dharma and how to apply these teachings, in our daily lives. And so we're setting our motivation as being one of getting better acquainted with the workings of our own minds, developing a more realistic way of understanding reality, of creating our own reality, and in that way, making sure that we craft our happiness in a way that's of greatest benefit, not just to us, but for all sentient beings, making the most of our precious human birth. All right. So so we've been going through the four seals of the Buddhist way of thinking, and we're down to the last two, which are all phenomena are empty and devoid of self, and the last is nirvana, is peace. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of a review of this topic of impermanence, which was what we talked about in the past session, which is that all conditioned things are impermanent. And so beginning with a statement from one of the sutras, I believe, where the Buddha said that sentient beings are evanescent. That's such a great word. Sentient beings are evanescent, like the reflection of the moon in rippling water. And so, we talked about the difference between gross level impermanence and subtle level impermanence. And so gross level impermanence is something that we're all well aware of. So we talk about death, right? And that's how we can see that, we ourselves and all sentient beings that we're in contact with, and directly and indirectly, how we're all affected by changes that are quite obvious, right? Death being the most obvious, but even things like, like climate change, right? And so we're all directly and indirectly affected by crazy weather patterns, like, heavy rain in January in Connecticut, right? Instead of heavy snow, flooding all around the world, wildfires, shortages of food and other resources, extreme temperatures, right? So that's gross level impermanence. Or, like if you go to the hospital, you see, because I went in for my surgery, right? You see lots of people, on their stretchers in the staging area before they go in for surgery, right? And they're all just lined up like, airplanes waiting to take off in the air on the runway, right? It's really it was quite amazing. Everybody's there just waiting to be operated on. Or you go to the, even just to the doctor's office, right? Our waiting room is always so crowded. Everybody needs to be helped because we're all changing, right? And then on a more subtle level, right? And so the subtle impermanence refers to the moment by moment changes that are taking place that we're not so aware of, right? But again, we know to a certain extent that, again, going back to the body, because that's something that we can relate to, but more easily, but let's say the movement of the breath, right? We know that the breath is circulating through every corner of our body, and that it's, changing from moment to moment. Likewise, we know that the fluids are circulating throughout our body, whether it's, the blood or all the other good stuff. It's being pumped by the heart. Whether, we're watching it or not, the breath and all of the inner workings of the body continue. Our skin is, being sloughed off. It's growing. Our hair is, growing, or, it's falling out. We don't know what kinds of, tumors might be slowly growing within us. And so, our bodies, at both a subtle and a gross level, are kind of like big machines, right? They're always in the process of change in response to, internal and external stimuli, right? And then at a more subtle level, then of course we could talk about and examine our own feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, right? We're creating the karmic seeds all the time with every action of body, speech, and mind. We've got karmic seeds that are ripening, that are being exhausted, and new karmic seeds are being created, right? That will create our future experience. And so we talked about how, due to misunderstanding impermanence, right? Then what happens? Because we take things as being real, as permanent, then we tend to get wrapped up in these assumptions, right? In our projections. We have to assume that something's going to be the same, the next in the future, right? Even in the short-term future. And so we base our lives around these, assumptions, around our anticipation for how something is going to be, right? We hold on to ourselves, we hold on to others and our environment as being unchanging. And so that means that we fall into the trap of thinking that bad situations will never end, and that happy situations will continue, right? And so even if it's obvious that something that we find pleasurable is going to end, right? Like, let's say, somebody gave you we're enjoying a big vanilla ice cream cone, right? Everybody likes ice cream, right? Well, so you have this big vanilla ice cream cone, and you're very carefully, eating the ice cream cone, being careful not to let, a single precious, yummy, delicious drop, fall, right? It takes a lot of art to eat a big ice cream cone without making a mess, right? And so even though you're down to the bottom of the cone and it's almost gone, right? Even when you eat that last bit of the yummy, delicious cone, right? You feel a little bit disappointed or a little bit hurt that the experience is over, right? And then you're kind of worried, like you're anticipating the end of the ice cream cone. So it's like all that mental stuff, right? Or, let's say you've been planning on and working hard to make it happen so that you can move in with somebody you love, with your partner, right? Your heart connection, right? And then everything's going really well, but then, maybe a few minutes, a few minutes, that would be bad. A few months later, things just fall apart, right? And so, you feel surprised, shocked even, right? That all that time and care and attention that you devoted into this beautiful relationship just came to nothing in a way. And likewise, if you're on the opposite side, if you're stuck in a relationship with somebody who you don't like, right? Let's say you're working with somebody who just seems to be, the personification of evil, like the real bad guy, right? Like some kind of corrupt boss. You know that the guy's behaving unethically, that maybe he's stealing, and then he actually forces you to engage in the same negative behavior, right? He wants you to be just as bad as he is, right? And so, it feels like that situation is never going to end, right? It feels like, you're trapped, that you can't get out. But eventually, again, that's a perception of some situation that's never going to end, right? But eventually it will, right? The causes and conditions that created that situation to arise will end. And so I think that our ability to cope with change, just as a general idea, seems to be related to whether we are generally like optimistic people or pessimistic, right? And so I think optimists are more likely to think that, a bad situation, will end, right? And that they'll stick it out, thinking that, okay, the situation will turn around in the future will be brighter, right? But if you're a pessimist, then, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You don't see the silver lining of the clouds, right? You're just going to feel that difficulties are never going to end, and maybe problems will just get worse, right? So whether you have an optimistic perspective or a pessimistic perspective will definitely color your how you deal with change and impermanence. So on the one hand, we're aware of impermanence, right? Both our own evanescence of ourselves, on the environment. And we all know the expression YOLO. Did you hear that, right? Yeah. You only live once, right? And that can mean different things. So on the one hand, it means to just, relax and enjoy life, right? Take it easy. It could be interpreted as, well, it's okay to just be maybe narcissistic, selfish, right? I only live once, go for it, do whatever you want to do, right? But I think the idea is that you can relax and appreciate all the good in your life, right? Don't be too uptight, okay? Because on the one hand, at a deeper level, we tend to ignore this idea of impermanence, like I was just saying, right? And so by ignoring impermanence, that means that we tend to cling to ourselves, we cling to our possessions, cling to everything, thinking that they're not going to change, that we'll always have them. And so that, as we've learned, only leads to more suffering. And so, we're like little children, like a child who's holding on to a balloon, right? And then a gust of wind comes and blows the balloon away up into the sky, right? And the child is just so sad. Cries and cries and cries, right? So that's like us. And so why do we hold on to what we love, our mistaken happiness? Why do we hold on to it so tightly, right? Why do we allow ourselves to feel this pain? And that's because basically we don't know any better, right? We're completely fooled by these, mistaken appearances that arise from ignorance, right? And so what we think of is happiness in disguise, right? What we think of as permanent is actually impermanent, right? What we think of as existing independently and external to us, external to causes and conditions, is actually the result of a complex, coming together of many causes and conditions, especially karma, right? Karmic seeds ripening. And then nirvana. Well, we probably don't know too much about nirvana. And so Dalai Lama explains how things appear to our minds that are so polluted by ignorance. And he says things appear as being independent, as being discrete objects existing under their own power, with their own inherent existence or essence. They seem to exist from their own side. And so the objects the appearance of objects as existing in their own right is false, right? And so how do we overcome that? So the idea that objects exist in that way is erroneous, but we can refute it. We can get rid of that idea by applying, reasoning, rational analysis. Okay, so that's from the book Approaching the Buddhist Path. So that's really important, right? So here we are talking about ignorance, but and if we were stuck with ignorance in some kind of permanent way, well, then there wouldn't be much to talk about, right? We could all just go home and be stuck. But that's not the case, right? The Buddhist path is one of identifying the problem, which is ignorance, and then eliminating the problem, right? So that we can find freedom from suffering. And it's a choice, right? It's a responsibility, and it's a choice that we make, whether we want to continue to be on the merry-go-round and going up and down and suffering, or we can stop the ride and jump off. All right. And so like I said, we believe in this unchanging, permanent self, and because that's what we've been taught, since beginning of this time. We don't realize that it's a mistaken appearance that results from ignorance. And we think that we exist inherently. And what does that mean? It means that, there's some kind of a permanent essence, or some people say soul, or some kind of unchanging me, I, right, self or ego, that can be found, right? Whether it's somewhere in your body, or it's in your mind, is it your consciousness, right? We feel that there's something there, and it's that innate sense of an essence that gives rise to this self-grasping. Right? And so based on, like I said, based on our experience of our body or our mind and the different elements that compose those things, and we think that we go on this assumption, right? The way we exist in daily life is based on that assumption that, yes, indeed, there is, that I exist. And so, what's the big downside of having that mindset? Well, we're stuck holding on to this sense of self that is fundamentally incorrect. And we know it's incorrect because that's why we're so anxious, why we're so insecure all the time, right? Why we're so, basically unhappy, okay? It's because we're clutching onto something that doesn't exist. But it's very important to note that what are we exactly talking about? Let's be a little more specific. So the ordinary sense of self, the self that is sitting in the chair, politely listening to this talk, or is maybe dozing off, or maybe you're on your phone out there, you're multitasking if you guys are online, whatever. That self does exist, all right? We're not saying that ordinary self doesn't exist, okay? What does not exist is the self that grasps at the ordinary self as having some kind of inherent existence. Okay, so it's that mistaken mind. And so, for example, this actually happened to me the other day. I was in New York City, and I'd driven down from Connecticut, right? So it's kind of tired, and the traffic had been bad. And then, there's alternate side of the street parking in New York City, Manhattan. And it was a Friday, and I couldn't find a parking spot. And finally, I saw, some cars and people waiting in their cars. And then I saw a spot. So I was like zooming into the spot. And then this lady in a big SUV drives up, and she's rolling down the window, like bang, beeping the horn. Rah. And she's like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I parked the car." She's like, No, I was waiting for that spot. She was about to kill me. So I was like apologizing. I got out of the spot, right? And so the point is that when you feel stressed when somebody attacks you or insults you, then that's a good opportunity to feel that innate sense of self-cherishing appear, right? Because that's the situation that provokes that sense of of self, makes it emerge, right? So ordinarily, if you're just driving along and there's no stress, just the person that sense of self that's driving and moving, driving the car around, that's not what we're talking about. That's the ordinary sense of self, okay? But under pressure, under stress, that innate sense of like, that was my parking spot, right? I worked hard to get into that parking spot. I was waiting patiently for hours to get into that parking spot, right? It's that sense of self that we're trying to uproot, okay? So that's really important. So in the book called The Essential Nectar by Geshe Rabten, he makes the same point. So just to emphasize this, and so a short quote, the I that we speak of normally in everyday activity, like I'm going shopping, etc., that involves a correct way of apprehending the person. And it's only when we're praised or criticized, something like that, that a strong sense of ego grasped at as inherently existent, grasped as the object of the praise or the blame. It's under those conditions that false sense of I appears. So that's an important distinction. And so, seeing that we and all sentient beings, are under the influence of that diluted mindset, right? It's kind of like being a little mouse, caught in a maze that doesn't have an exit, right? We're just going to be stuck in this maze. And so based on that, then we naturally feel a sense of closeness and compassion and empathy for them, right? How can you not feel compassion for others? So the definitions here, so love, and I know you guys know this, but love is the wish for others to be happy. And it goes along with a sense of, warm affection and endearment, for others, right? Compassion then is the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And so, the two go hand in hand, right? If you don't have love for others, right? If you don't wish for others to be happy, you don't feel that concern for others, then compassion, would not have a basis, right? Meaning that, if we only care for ourselves, the basis is direct. If the basis of our love is only like self-love, right? Then that means we would be stuck with only having a very limited sense of compassion because it would be self-compassion, right? So that's not going to get us too far, right? And then if you have, if you have love without compassion, right? Just the love or no compassion, then what does that give you? Then that's nice, it's that beautiful feeling of wishing people to be happy, but it doesn't have any power behind it, right? Because you wouldn't go take it a step further and wish for them to be free from suffering and then eventually act in such a way to liberate beings from suffering. Okay, so you really need both. So then what's necessary? What do we need to develop love and compassion? Okay, so the first thing is, so there are 3 points. And these are points that are used in meditations on developing love and compassion. So I'm sure if you've worked with these ideas before. And so the first is to acknowledge and understand our own suffering. Right, and so we talked about a lot about that in the last class. And this gives rise to the understanding of other suffering, right? And so we talked about the suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering. And so our very nature, our very being of life in cyclic existence, going around and around, is in the nature of suffering, right? And so without a deep understanding, of our own suffering, as a foundation, as a starting point, then our compassion for others, is going to be superficial. It's going to be unstable, right? Because it's just at the surface, right? And so it's and I definitely, I use my own very limited experience of suffering as to be honest, So for me, like, okay, I feel sad about somebody, then my sense of compassion is very, very limited, like, okay, it's limited to just writing checks to some kind of charity without actually, rolling up my sleeves and doing too much to be of benefit, right? So if you feel a very deep seated sense of compassion, that you're not going to give up, you're in it for the long run, right? And no matter what happens, you'll make whatever sacrifices are necessary to help others, right? So instead of just writing a check to some charitable organization, maybe you're out there delivering food on a winter day to help, homeless people who are living out in the cold. Okay. The next point is that sense of cultivating that sense of endearment for others, wanting to take direct responsibility for protecting others from suffering. And first and foremost, that has to be based on a sense of equanimity, right? And so there's a prayer of the four immeasurables, and oftentimes immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, equanimity. We can do set our motivation and set the direction, the whole tone of that meditation correctly by first cultivating that sense of everybody, all living beings, being equal, right? So no discrimination. Everyone's got to be equal. And that's a really big topic. All of these are really huge topics that I'm just kind of dropping little hints about. Okay, so we need to go beyond these artificial distinctions, between who's near to us, who's far from us. And that means cutting through these, uprooting these emotions of attachment, attachment being pulling things close to us, holding things near, and anger or hatred that pushes things away, right? It's that hostile mind. Okay, so those would be our enemies, right? And so, we're kind of in a bind because biologically or evolutionarily speaking, right, this me-centric, ego universe comes from our biological conditioning, right, from our survival skills, because of those. And then we choose others, we discriminate among people or things, right, based on whether or not we think that, innately, they're going to harm us or help us, right? And so if they cause us pain, well, then they're an enemy. If they're nice to us and bring us happiness, then they're a friend. And so it's a very limited, narrow-minded perspective, but that's the hand we're dealt. And then the last point is to reflect on the kindness and of all sentient beings, and to develop a sincere wish to repay that kindness, right? And to alleviate the suffering of all beings, like I said, whether they're close to us, friends, family, significant others, or people who we're hostile to. We're all connected. And so deeply, deeply becoming aware of and appreciating that sense of interdependence, of interconnectedness, right? In our relationships with others, not just the people that we're close to, but the strangers in our lives, the people who are neutral to, the people who we have, hostile feelings towards. Really, really important. So those are the key points in cultivating love and compassion. Okay, so understanding suffering, cultivating a sense of endearment and responsibility for protecting others, and then reflecting on the kindness and the feeling a sense of appreciation and gratitude for all sentient beings, all mother sentient beings. Okay. So any questions so far? Anything to share?
So I'm a leader in my role.
Okay.
As an individual, I want to fire. I know that this is going to negatively affect this person. How does that affect me and my own karma? And now keep in mind, I've had multiple conversations with this individual, but that is something I need to do to affect this person. How does that karmically work?
So the question is, if you're a leader or a manager, a boss, and you're in the position where you need to fire somebody, and you recognize that doing so will have a negative impact on this person's livelihood, what's the karmic outcome of making that kind of a tough decision? So, I mean, presumably, if you need to fire the person because of what's the real why you have to, is like financial reasons, or is it the person's performance, or okay, for performance reasons. So maybe it's somebody who's not meeting expectations or meeting, yeah, the goals. So you've tried everything you can to talk to the person to get them to improve their behavior, right? And it's just not, communication is not having the intended effect. So, I mean, I guess that would be the ideal outcome. The easiest outcome would be the more conversations, the guy improves his or her performance, and then we can move on. But if you get to the point where you think that this is just not going to work out, then maybe you're not intentionally harming the person by committing a non-virtuous act, right? You're not lying, cheating, killing, stealing, any of those non-virtuous acts, right? You've given the person a choice, you've given the person opportunities and chances, and made it clear what the expectations are. So I think that, in that sense, you've done everything that you can to keep the door open, for this individual. So
Where being a leader is trying to help those help themselves.
Yeah. For whatever reason, yeah. And at the same time, you have coworkers and other, people who are working with that person who may be adversely affected by his or her underperformance, right? So I think, given all of those conditions, then that's probably the only thing that you can do. Right? And so, you make that transition out the door as easy as possible, right? And provide as much support as you can. But yeah, I don't see that as negative in a karmic sense. I think if you, so if your intention, yeah, the opposite case that would be more obvious to be, like, I fired this guy because he was being mean to me, because like he was being a jerk. I couldn't stand, like he eats lunch with his mouth open. I couldn't stand that, so I fired him, right? That would be pretty obviously. Eric?
Well, I remember talking about this like over a year ago with Geshe Gargi, and one thing that he said and just kind of understood is that we really don't have any idea whether our actions in a case like that will cause suffering.
Oh, that too.
In other words, it could be without us knowing the best thing that ever happened to the person.
That's a good idea.
And also that whether they suffer is very much their state of mind and their path. There are plenty of people that
Right.
are fired who don't suffer, and there are people who get raises who are miserable.
Right.
And continue to suffer. So they're not as directly related as we might think. And again, sometimes one bad thing happening in your life could prevent something worse.
Sure.
That avoids causes and conditions that we have no idea about, but it could also benefit them due to the strangeness of causes and conditions, the unpredictability.
Absolutely.
He said to separate, like you said, if you're not committing a non-virtuous act, it's not really entirely on you whether they suffer or not. It's simply part of the mix of life.
Yeah.
And isn't it kind of like a parent, like with a child, if you shield them from too many consequences, then how are they gonna learn? You know, if you can't protect them from absolutely everything,
That's
then you
true.
cause them more harm.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be, yeah. Absolutely. Good points. Yeah.
I
Okay.
would add also one thing that I think about is to, as you said, on the way out the door, you're not closing the door as much as you are also then providing some resources, so, you know, places they could go to get the money. I always seems like this is not ideal for either one of us, but let me help you help yourself.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. Right. Now maybe you're creating a good opportunity for somebody else. Like, you're gonna hire somebody else and give them a great opportunity.
I go from a part-time position that was part of my overall living, and my first instinct was extremely self-centered, like, but I was doing such a great job, and this can't be because maybe it was my performance, and
Sure.
I felt self-conscious and insecure, and then within a few minutes, I checked myself because of my studies, and I said, you know what, someone's gonna get this job. I hope that this benefits them. I will do my best to make up that money per month,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna let this affect me. And that person may need this job so much more than me. It may be
Right.
their path. I've already been on this path for a really long time.
Right.
Maybe this is their entry into that industry
That's
that
beautiful.
I got 20 years ago because someone else was let go or
Yeah, yeah.
So
Beautiful. That's a very good way to.
hoping it helps someone else is also a big benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's that optimism kicking in.
And isn't that like even positive in front of that? It's
Yeah,
the next time
absolutely.
something like that happens. So it's,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And 5 years ago, I would have totally spun out and just been like, face staying and I'm not gonna learn any lesson from this, and who cares about the person that gets my, that was my job.
Right.
A couple of years, a couple minutes in, check that. And it didn't bother me anymore.
You also mentioned green shirt for your performance, and really in fairness, someone should help you know that. Why, that, what you heard described earlier, it's about performance, and some of it you've done quite a bit, and for the individual.
Yes.
And the person, we all put ourselves exactly where we are. So the person who's least surprised, probably who's losing his job, is the person who's losing his job. Maybe a help to help him on to what he really does want to do.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. Yeah. You get out of maybe he was stuck in a rut, right? And then now he's got all this free time, or she's got all this free time to do something totally different.
We all know that losing money is not the actual cause of suffering in those situations.
It's the ego.
It's how we view it, yeah.
Yeah.
I need this, so otherwise so many bad things are gonna happen, like I'm gonna be homeless or something.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Fear of the unknown. Fear was a loss. It's the impermanence of the whole thing, right? The impermanence, fear of the unknown. Okay, so our ability to generate pure love and compassion, underlies our spiritual aims, which I think segues with this conversation. So from a big picture perspective, the path to Buddhahood, is a gradual process, right? And it's described as having 3 paths. So the path of someone on the initial scope or the lower scope leads to what's known as higher status, namely, the intention is to ensure that, your next life is equally good or better, right, than the current life, but least you want to come back as a human being, right? That's actually being the best, most optimal opportunity. And so second is on that basis. So these all kind of stack up, right? On the basis of the lower scope teachings, then you can cultivate the intention of the intermediate scope person, which is somebody who is striving for liberation. And then on that basis, an advanced practitioner, so to speak, is striving for Buddhahood itself. Okay, and so there's specific teachings and meditations for people on each of the three paths. For the initial scope, as we've talked about in this series of classes, the main subjects are death, suffering of the lower realms, taking refuge, and the workings of karma. For the intermediate scope, the main subjects are the sufferings of the higher realms, which we did not talk about, how samsara functions, and the path to liberation. And then followers on the advanced path train in developing the mind of enlightenment and the practices of a bodhisattva, known as the six perfections, such as generosity, patience, perseverance, and the like, and other practices that lead all the way to enlightenment. And so one of the special techniques for breaking free from samsaric suffering then is through the meditation practice known as mind training. Okay, and so just very briefly, we can use mind training techniques to transform the difficulties that we encounter in daily life into opportunities for spiritual growth. And so then, rather than getting upset when we run into difficult situations, we learn to welcome hardships, just as we were talking about, because we can use these as a means to overcome self-cherishing, right? That sense of ego grasping, and instead to produce compassion for others, just like we were talking about. So, we recognize that we're not victims of external enemies, the bad guys out there, but instead we are the victims of our own karma and delusions. And we can choose, this always comes back to choice, we can choose to get rid of our self-centered, hostile, aggressive, reactive states of mind, and instead turn towards others. We can intentionally cultivate other-centered, I think that's my new word, other-centered, does that word exist? Other-centered gentleness, and calm and peace, right? It's a choice. And so I'm giving a little plug for my own upcoming series of classes. We're doing these Compassion Day meditation classes. So the first one is going to be March 23rd, but we'll have an opportunity to talk more about what compassion is. And then, so there'll be like a discussion session, and then a little break, and then meditation on these mind training techniques. All right. And so, so that's all about compassion. And then, we've also briefly touched on this idea of wisdom, right? Because I was talking about ignorance and overcoming ignorance. So I want to talk about wisdom a little bit more in our remaining time here. Okay, so wisdom's a huge topic, and you can't talk about wisdom in 15 minutes, but I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. So here is a wonderful way of thinking about wisdom and its relationship with compassion. This is a quote from a sutra called the Vimalakirti Sutra. Highly, highly recommend. Vimalakirti. How should a bodhisattva look at a sentient being? A bodhisattva, okay, bodhisattva is somebody who is on the practicing the Buddhist path to enlightenment. A bodhisattva should look at a sentient being in the same way a wise person looks at the reflection of the moon in water. Why should a bodhisattva see a sentient being as a reflection? We usually assume that a reflection is just a reflection, that it doesn't really exist. That although a reflection doesn't truly exist, it's impossible to deny that we can see the moon reflected on the surface of still water. And when the moon isn't obscured by clouds or the water muddy, because clarity and emptiness arise at the same time, The moon's reflection is as complete, perfect, clear, and there as the moon in the sky, right? And so that's the quote from the sutra itself. And then there's if you download the sutra from the website, it's like 84,000.com or something. It's it's a beautiful collection of translations of the Buddhist teachings and the commentaries. And so you can download the Vimalakirti Sutra, and there's a wonderful introduction by Dzongtsar Jamyang Khyentse, who is a Tibetan, contemporary Tibetan scholar and teacher. And so here's what he says, is that what Vimalakirti is saying is that if you believe that a truly existent sentient being is out there somewhere, and that bodhisattvas can practice generating compassion for that being, you're effectively asserting that the person truly exists, okay? That their problems and their suffering exist independently, that the diagnosis of their problem is not subjective or fabricated, and also the solution is not fabricated. It truly exists. That's not all. So hang on, I know this is a lot, but it's very interesting how he ties it all together. So he says, that's not all. Okay, so when you try to help someone simply because you believe there's a problem, right? An object of that problem, a diagnosis of the problem, and a solution, you will end up becoming the victim of your own compassion, sorrow, and concern, right? We do this all the time. The Californians, the Californians have a word for it, codependency. For example, a woman tries to help her alcoholic husband, but in the process becomes ensnared in the problem of how to help, what help really is, not being able to help, and so on. What Vimalakirti is suggesting here is that a bodhisattva should look at the person they're trying to help in the same way we look at the moon's reflection in water. When a bodhisattva sees a sentient being as a mirage, a reflection, or the trail left by a flying bird, replied Vimalakirti, there's no trace of assumption, expectation, or judgment in his view. The way he sees a sentient being is not deceptive. As he is not deceived by his own view of sentient beings, there is no deception at all. Isn't that love? So beautiful. So true. Okay. So that's a lot to think about. So go back and read the sutra. Very, very beautiful. And I'll talk about it a little bit more later. Then also just one more quote. I'm going to go through this quickly. This is from Janet Edley's book, How Generosity Works. It's a series of books on how to become a bodhisattva in daily life. And she's doing a book discussion group on this first book in the series, How Generosity Works. So we've done 2 classes, and the 3rd class is going to be on, I believe, Tuesday, February the 13th. So please check the calendar. Very, very amazing books. And so she wrote, wisdom is the antidote to ignorance. And when you get it, it's like hitting the jackpot at the slot machines. One of the many treasures contained in wisdom is understanding the reality of what you just told me. So it's a fictional account, it's a story. That because no one and no thing exists by itself, there can be no true peace until all are free from suffering. So once you have that understanding, when you see someone who's suffering, your reflexive response becomes compassion. It's like when you have a pain in your foot, your hand instinctively moves to massage and soothe the pain. It's not thinking, oh, that foot has nothing to do with me. I'm a hand. I'm not in pain. So you just let that foot deal with its own pain. Its pain's not my problem, right? With wisdom, we understand that all beings are connected through causes and conditions, right? We understand that we're all part of the same karmic results. We have the choice to stop the vicious cycle of pain and suffering. By generating good actions that bring good karmic results instead. When our minds are infused with wisdom, we will have the impulse to relieve pain for others, just like the hand has for the foot. And then when we thoroughly and unshakably comprehend that we are all connected, that there's no real separation between one and another, we will have uncovered the alchemic power to convert disharmony into peace. This alchemic power is the spirit of enlightenment, or bodhicitta mind. So beautifully said. And so Dzongtsar Jamyang Khyentse cautions us, though, that if we're not careful, then if we cling to a spiritual path, right? If we start to cling to the Buddha Dharma, right? And we cling to this vision of ourselves as, as becoming, Buddhas. We could fall into this trap of like substituting one clinging for another clinging, right? And so, if we assume that the path of that the Buddha's teachings, that Buddhahood are all inherently existent, right? Then we're just falling into that same clinging, at something as being inherently existent when it's not, right? So everything is everything is in the nature of emptiness, and we have to just bear that in mind, okay? Because if you don't, then you end up with that same very tight ego grasping, right? Like, get out of my way, I'm on my way somewhere, right? Well, you're not. So thinking that there's, something that has to be purified from our minds, like we talked so much about the negative emotions, the afflictions, right? Thinking of those as inherently existing, thinking that there's someone who needs to be purified. All of this also is just mistaken view, okay? The subjective mind of compassion is also a mistaken view, right? Thinking that there's an object of compassion, that's also, mistaken view. In the sense that neither of these are inherently existent. So just watch out, because definitely that can happen, right? So let's say a simple example, trying to generate this mind of enlightenment, this intention to become a better person. The ordinary intention behind, let's say, a simple action of filling the bird feeder, right? Everybody's got a bird feeder, right? Raise your hand, we got a bird feeder. This is Connecticut, you got a bird feeder. The motivation for filling the bird feeder, would be for the comfort and to extend the life, or to preserve the life of the birds, right now. It could be, excuse me, out of attachment to birds, right? You could be like feeling guilty about climate change and the fact that there are fewer birds, right? Has anybody noticed that? I actually think there are fewer birds, because I used to fill my bird feeder like every other day, and it didn't last for 1 week, and now it just seems like it's lasting longer before I have to refill it. Or the extraordinary motivation is what? The extraordinary motivation would be, to do the same act, right? The same act of filling the darn bird feeder. I have to fill a bird feeder. It's boring. But keeping in mind the emptiness of the person who's doing the act, the emptiness of the act itself, right? The emptiness of the object, which would be the birds. So the emptiness of all those three things. And the motivation then would be, I'm not just offering ordinary bird food. I'm transforming this bird food into the nectar of the holy Dharma, thinking that, wow, may this be the nourishing food that sustains these birds so that, in their next life, they'll be reborn human, and then eventually they too will fulfill their ultimate potential of becoming Buddhas, right?
And is it also like correct to do like, since everything is connected and interdependent, say that like, I'm really helping all sentient beings by, it's not just this bird, by helping
Sure.
something in that chain of depending, it's gonna spread around to everything since everything is oneness kind of thing. Is that something?
So everything is oneness.
I mean, like, since, not one, I mean, since everything is connected, since everything's kind of a part of some, not truly existent figure whole, but whatever, the hallucination or whatever it's tough to understand it at my stage, I completely understand emptiness, but,
Well,
you
let's just say, like, if you're feeding 10 birds at your bird feeder, then you could easily multiply that. You say not just 10 birds, but 100 birds, but like, and then all the creatures that are dependent on the birds, right? I mean, you could
Right.
slowly expand the universe of who you're helping.
right, okay.
That's a start. Okay. Oh darn. Wait, let me just cheat. I'm gonna look ahead, see how many more pages I got. Because I was really trying to keep this short, and I'm not. Once again, failing miserably. Right, I'll try to shorten this. All right, so as we mentioned before, so appearances, conceptual appearances to our sense consciousness, the appearances themselves are not the problem. The problem is attachment to appearances are the problem, or mistaken attachment to appearances are the problem. And so the point I want to make is that, again, following up with this idea of, starting to cling to a spiritual path, starting to cling to, well, anyway, so along the same lines is this idea of questioning conventional logic, right? And this is very much part of the wisdom teachings, right? And so we have this very limited worldview that we find it very difficult to imagine, to think of a bigger, better world, right? And so even in ordinary conversation or ordinary life, right? We think of worldly beings, who are geniuses, who are the visionaries of our times, right? The innovators. All of those people are people who basically can think outside of the box, right? And they take chances, right? They're people who can make what seems impossible possible, right? And so likewise, the Buddha on a bigger scale, I guess, encourages us to break through the restrictions of our limited dualistic thinking, this dichotomy between subject and object, self and others, samsara and nirvana, right? Tall and short. And so, there's so many examples from the life stories of the Buddha, other teachers of this, how we can, through the power of meditation, through the force of our love and compassion, how we can shatter all of those misconceptions, right? And so, so just one really, I'll make this a really short example. Some of you may have heard it. Life story of Milarepa, right? So Milarepa had a student named Rechungpa, and Rechungpa was not quite there yet, right? And so they got caught in a big hailstorm, a rainstorm, and then he ran off, abandoning his teacher Milarepa, and then he couldn't find him, and then he's getting all soaking wet, and then finally he saw like the horn of a yak lying on the ground, and he heard Milarepa's voice coming out of the yak horn. He's like, how could that be? And he tried to pick it up, but it was so heavy he couldn't even move it. And then he looked inside, and there's Milarepa sitting inside the yak horn. And Milarepa, this is the cool part, Milarepa wasn't did not appear to be any smaller than he, did in ordinary life. And neither did the yak horn seem any bigger, right? Somehow Milarepa was in there, right? And Milarepa said, "Hey, come on in, get out of the cold," right? And he could not do it, right? He said, "If you match me at this skill, come in right now." But he couldn't do anything, even though he saw there was plenty of room in the yak horn. There are all many, many examples. There's examples from the Vimalakirti Sutra too.
Is that like because he was too attached to the idea that that's not possible? That
Yeah.
this isn't something that can happen right here and that I can do.
And he couldn't because he didn't have the
Right.
merit, he didn't have the wisdom, the causes that would have made it possible, like Milarepa, to shatter those conceptions. Yeah, breaking through conventional logic. And so it's good to keep that in mind, because here we're thinking about Buddhahood, right? And so what Buddhahood is, being completely free from the cycle of birth and death, right? We're thinking big picture here, right? And so in order to be able to do this, we're going to have to be able to push through the limits of conventional thinking, right? Not saying that things don't exist, like that's a whole nother topic. Things conventionally exist, but breaking through our attachment to appearances, incorrect attachment to appearance. Okay. And so I think all of this is encouraging, and that our current mindset, as we've talked about in this series, just brings us misery. And instead, we need to be able to expand our way of thinking by relaxing in the way we see things, right? And so we need to become more skillful. Right? So instead of with just like obsessing with checking the boxes on everything, just right? Doing all the things that we've been told to do just right? We can do things more intentionally, more creatively, with greater freedom, right? We can make things really complicated if we want to. I'm very good at that. Or we can just relax, with our "you only live once" mentality and just be more carefree, right? And then we can focus on what's really important in the long run.
Can I ask a question,
Go for it,
Anila?
please.
I was just wondering, I know a lot of times you talk about meditation and, and detaching and working on detaching from self and self-cherishing. Are there other things like, because I know for myself, I really struggle with detachment, and and I guess what I'm asking is, are there little things, because I try my best to live an ethical life, but are there little things you can do to make that detachment easier on a daily basis? Like, I know there's meditation. I really struggle with meditation. I'm working on it, and I have been able to make some breakthroughs, but I'm struggling with it, and I've also had a lot of suffering and that I've had to work through. And this class and the teachings have really helped me. But what would you suggest for becoming less self-cherishing and detaching more? Can you offer some concrete suggestions?
Oh, detachment specifically from the self? Oh,
Well, from you know what I'm trying to say, like not just from self, but I guess from a self is probably the biggest thing, but from other things too, I mean, like, just in general, I find that the concepts are really hard to put into practice. I work on them, and I try my best. But I don't know. I don't know if I speak for others too in this,
absolutely. Yeah.
but I'm just wondering, it seems like there's a lot of concepts here.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there's more, direction.
Anila,
Louisa?
can I jump in for 1 second?
Sure.
I would suggest don't give up. I've been going to DNKL since 2012, and I still learn something new in every class. And it takes time. So I would just share that as my own personal experience. Don't give up. Just keep, I like to say, I just keep pecking away like an old chicken. So
Thank you.
I just share that.
Yeah, and I think that since this is an intro class and I have so much to cover, that maybe, especially this, I have like 10 minutes left. I need to talk a little bit more about what it means to attain enlightenment, the path to freedom. But I think, we're not going to get to enlightenment after a 4-session Buddhism international class, right? We all know that. We're not going to become proficient in meditation when we have really barely done any actual meditation in this 4-session class, right? And so, like, Louisa was saying, that we need to maybe extract, the essence of what we've been talking about and apply that, hopefully that encouragement and inspiration to watch the mind. That's really what it comes down to, right? To watch the mind as we see these negative tendencies, these negative habits, identifying what's going on, right? That's really the first step, recognizing the problems that we're creating from ourselves as a result of that self-cherishing, recognizing the self-cherishing. If you can already do that, and it sounds like you can, then that's, a very, very important first step. And then the second step would then be to, now what do I do? I can sort of see the enemy and the enemy is me, right? Then what do I do? And so then we're very kind and soft but firm intention to, break free from those negative habits, then being able to, as those negative emotions arise, right, as those karmic seeds ripening, then being able to stop them, right? And so on the one hand, we can say that we're all perfect the way we are. On the other hand, we realize that we, can do a little bit better, right? And so we can remove these temporary stains, right? These negative emotions. And instead, instead of being a pessimist, become an optimist, right? Make an intentional effort to breathe, right? To just stop, relax, breathe, whatever we're doing, right? I think, it really is a problem in terms of just having very distracted, fragmented minds these days, right? And so whatever we're doing, maybe intentionally pausing for 5 minutes. I mean, this is even in the New York Times, mindful moments, it's all over. Everybody knows that this is a valid, scientifically proven technique. Just stop, things, maybe every hour you stop for 5 minutes if you can, depending on your environment. Maybe you have a job that you're not allowed to do that, right? But wherever you can, even if you just go to the restroom, okay, so you intentionally, just wash your hands or take a break, walk slowly to the restroom, whatever it is, but give yourself that chance to collect yourself, to check in on the inner workings, on how you're feeling, what's your intention, what have you done, over the course of the day, right? Have you been setting your mind in the direction, that's facing towards others, right? Or is your direction and intention only, your energy only, it's one of those days, we've all had them, where you wake up and you're, focused only on yourself, right? All of those little changes add up, okay? And then the more that you study, the more that you continue to understand in greater detail how the soul works, then the change will definitely occur, as long as you have an open mind to it and you don't give up, right? Okay. Would somebody like to comment on that? 11:15.
Too, like if you, when you're new at something, and if you're a box checker, and you see all these beautiful new paths and ideas, and
Right.
you want to do them all at once, but isn't it, like when I plant my garden, I don't take all my seeds and put them all in the hole. I take, the tomato plant, and I plant that tomato, and I focus on that tomato plant. So sometimes I think we try to cover too much.
Yeah.
At one time, instead of going, I need to focus on this step, this breath, this plant, this seed, this moment. And then as we nurture that and we get deeper and we get more enlightened by that, then we're ready to plant the next seed.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Don't bite off too much, but
Yeah, take baby steps.
yeah, baby steps on the path and do a good job on planting a single seed and bringing it to fruition instead of scattering a whole bunch of seeds and maybe having a less productive crop. Yeah.
Honey love,
Louisa.
I'm sorry. I know you want to cover like wisdom, the rest of wisdom and enlightenment, but
5 minutes.
she asked for, I'm sorry, I don't know her name, but she asked for something very concrete and
Yeah.
said she was struggling with meditation. So I just want to put a shout out for the wonderful, wonderful multiple reprinted book called Mindfulness in Plain English.
Yeah, mindfulness in plain English.
I think that would be something very concrete and very easy to read for the Western mind. So I just wanted to put a shout out for that. So I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Louisa. Yeah,
Is that
Bhante Garantana, is that how you pronounce his last name?
Um,
I think so. Mindfulness and plain English. I think it just came out, and I think he's even giving a course on the wisdom experience. He's doing a class explaining his book.
Can you say the name one more time?
Mindfulness in plain English.
Plain English. Thank you.
So, all right, let me blab on for a little bit longer, and then Gloria is going to wrap up with an overview of some of the upcoming classes at DNKL that can help you continue to deepen and understand and apply these teachings. Okay. All right, so what exactly, we've done all this talking. We never really talked about what Buddhahood is. And so the mind of enlightenment is called bodhicitta. And bodhi means to be awakened, and chitta means mind. And so in Tibetan, the word is jang trup, and jang means that all of the mental obscurations have been completely purified, and as a result, it's a mind that can directly perceive all phenomena. And trup means to enhance all of our good qualities. So the point is that enlightenment isn't a place, right? It's a state of mind. And at the center lies a sincere wish to free all sentient beings from suffering. All right. And so enlightenment is a state that is, as I mentioned earlier, free from birth, old age, sickness, and death. No more delusions are generated. What's at the core of attaining this state of Buddhahood? The truth of the path teaches that there are 3 foundational trainings, and these, we're talking about practicing in daily life. Well, this is something we can definitely do right now, right? As you just, as we talked about, ethical conduct is crucial to sustaining our practice. Concentration, keeping tabs on what's going on in our minds, and wisdom analysis. Meditation go hand in hand. So we need to do all of these things, right? And so I touched briefly on this idea of Buddha nature, and so I just wanted to read one quote so that you have maybe a better understanding of what we're talking about here. So His Holiness writes, when we examine that separation from defilements, meaning the negative emotions, we discover that it is the ultimate nature of the mind that is free from defilements. This ultimate nature of mind exists from beginningless time. It exists as long as there is mind. In the continuum of sentient beings, the ultimate nature of the mind is called Buddha nature or Buddha potential. And when it becomes endowed with the quality of having separated from defilements, it is called nirvana. Therefore, the very basis for nirvana, the emptiness of the mind, is always with us. It's not something that's newly created or gained from outside, right? And so every living being has the potential to become enlightened. So that's something to feel good about, right? Okay. So, and so again, something that we can start out with is abandoning self-cherishing, right? And so if we get to the point where we make a concerted effort to identify and to realize that it's the self-cherishing mind that wants us to look elsewhere for the source of our problems, right? But that actually it is self-cherishing itself that is the cause of our unhappiness, right? As we work to uproot self-cherishing, then we find that our relationships with others become more and more open and spacious, because the basis for discriminating between stranger, friend and foe no longer exists. We recognize the fundamental equality of all living beings and how we all wish for happiness and to be free from suffering. As a result of meditating very extensively on suffering and karmic cause and effect, and we can feel our hearts start to melt and soften. We recognize that our relationships with others is based on a close interdependency, not disconnect. That it's more like the relationship between a mother or a father and a child. And so due to the spontaneous sense of empathy, a sense of kinship and sincere appreciation and gratitude arises. And so as we feel closer and more responsible for others, then we make that, our purpose, a purpose in life. Again, thinking about emptiness. But we can't turn our backs on others and simply walk away. So our whole purpose, our whole goal of attaining Buddhahood, the motivation then is to do so for others. Okay? So no matter what it takes, right, we're gonna make an effort. So, so I think I'm going to end there. Are there any questions? We can do questions for 5 minutes, and Gloria, you can wrap up. Any more questions or comments?
They're contemplating their enlightenment.
Concept of the three scopes, three levels of effort, unique to Mahayana Buddhism?
That's a good question. I think. Lower, middle, and advanced scope practitioners. I think that might be true. Would you like to comment that?
I come from the Buddhist tradition, which is Mahayana as well, and this which goes to the United States. We're all on a path to the cycle.
Okay,
And that was written by a teacher, am I right?
that I think is true. Yeah, I believe so.
Is it possible to sum up what they said? Because it's hard to hear.
Oh, the question is whether or not and you guys probably know this better than me, 'cause I'm blanking on it. The you know how like in the Lamrim Chamo we talk about the three scopes, the lower scope, intermediate scope, and advanced scope. The question is that specific to like to Tibetan Buddhism? Or does it exist maybe in other, like the Pali tradition? I'm so limited because I've really only read in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So I'll have to look in the book. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Everybody's falling asleep probably because I've been droning on and the sound of the rain is just so beautiful and comforting. Gloria, do you want to say something about our upcoming events?
Sure. Let me, am I allowed to share? Do I have permission?
Oh, I do not know.
I do have permission. Okay. Can everyone see this? I'm not sure if we have the big TV on, but I
No,
wanted to, I wanted to point out a couple of things. So, during the winter months, usually January, February, and into March is where we usually have our guest speakers. And that is really a great time for those, beginners or those wanting refreshing or just to kind of get a sampling because we have an array of different teachers while our teacher is traveling to India and taking some time, our other teacher for retreat and things like that. So that's always a great time of the year. We also have tons of other stuff throughout the year, but that is where we have most of the guest speakers. If you go to the main page, what you see here is this is always a view of classes coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that's kind of a quick at a glance, and if you click on it, it'll give you more information. The other way that you can find out is if you click up here, it says DNKL classes and events. You can take a look at the complete calendar, but sometimes people say, well, I don't know what I'm looking for, so I don't know what's there. So if you go just to classes, you'll see a list view. So you can scroll down, you scroll down here and you'll see all of the classes like this in a list view, and then you'll see the date, right? So that's one way to be able to see. And there is something, if you look right here, that's coming up on Tuesday night. This is we're really fortunate is that we have the abbot of Sarah May, which is the main monastery where our teachers are from, is going to give a talk. And this is really about the Four Noble Truths, which is really the basis of so much of what we're learning. If there's any text that's ever attached to it for readings, they'll be attached here. And I'll actually be adding text. There's a sutra for this. So if anytime there's text available, it'll be listed in the website. Okay. The other thing that's good that I wanted to point out from last week, which is brand new for those who have been here, if you go to previous teaching and courses, it brings us to all of the classes. So you see all the Buddhism in the nutshell classes that were here. It portrays them out. This is actually a direct link to our YouTube page. But if you don't want to navigate through YouTube, you can find it here. Mm-hmm. If you want to go to our YouTube page, hold on, where did it go? There should be a link down here. Right here, is that YouTube? No, that's Instagram, YouTube here. This will bring you to our actual live page, okay?
Link to the YouTube.
Yeah. But basically what makes it easier for folks is that, you can get everything directly from the website. You don't have to navigate, back and forth.
Actually, then navigate on the website and on YouTube.
It is.
Yeah. So the only thing here is it gives you the most recent, so you'd have to kind of scroll through here, but you can go back and forth. You can also subscribe to the YouTube page, and then if new videos come up, so let's say you're not always on the website and you want to see new things or you miss something, you can also get notifications from subscribing. And then the last thing I wanted to mention on here for those that we also have like the common prayers that we use either when we have a prayer session, which are on there, but this is a daily prayer and practice book. And we have some of the other puja prayers. These are a little bit more for those that study a little bit more, but we have links here to all of these. And we can build this, we'll be building this, over time with other kinds of things. So it makes it easier because as you've seen, so many of these things are free. We want access to be able to get these. And so, these are the ones that we predominantly use at DNKL, and there's some folks that put some time on the translations and so forth. So this is a nice reference as well. So the only thing, all of the classes are open to anyone. If there's advanced classes, meaning you have to have certain requirements before you take it, they'll be in the description. So most of the classes we try and make available to everyone. Meditation is a good class. The Sunday class is very open, non-Buddhist, but when you get into some of the, later in the year, you'll find some what are called tantric type classes, and they're much more advanced. But everything else is really open to beginners and doesn't require, prerequisites. And if they are, we would specify that for you. And you can also search for events here. You can look at it at a list by month, so you can get right to where I showed you before, or you can go to the month. Any questions or anything that folks may have? The only other thing I can tell you is if you join our mailing list, I do send out kind of a preview newsletter every couple of weeks, or depending, just to remind people of what's coming. And any new news that comes up, if you sign, I try not to do it too much to fill your mailbox, but to be informative. So at least every 2 weeks or something that comes out.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we've got a lot coming up. It's a very busy, Dharma-filled year. So I hope that you can come and join in with us. So that's about it for this nutshell class. If you have any other questions or comments, as always, feel free to reach out. My email is tendrol108@gmail.com. And we dedicate